Across the endless prairies of South Dakota, highways stretch like ribbons of asphalt beneath a vast, open sky. By day, the landscape is serene. Golden grasses sway in the wind. The horizon seems to go on forever. But when night falls, the highways take on a far darker presence. Headlights reveal fleeting shapes along the roadside. The hum of engines is joined by whispers that vanish with the wind. Figures appear suddenly in the distance, then vanish as cars approach. Some travelers hear voices calling from the ditch. Some feel hands brush against their car doors when no one is there. Some see phantom hitchhikers who disappear when given a ride. These prairies hold memory. They have witnessed tragedies, accidents, and restless souls who never left. And along these highways, the past still drives alongside the living. Tonight, we travel through South Dakota to uncover the most haunted prairie highways, roads where the wind carries stories, and shadows linger long after the sun sets. Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are safe and comfortable, because what we are about to explore is far from the towns, farms, and familiar roads you know. Highways cut straight through the grasslands, lonely paths for travelers. But these roads are steeped in history. Many accidents occurred when the night was dark and the prairie silent. Some travelers never reached their destinations. Over time, these highways gained a reputation. Ghostly figures appear on the roads. Lights flash where no cars are. Cold spots form in empty fields. Before we begin our journey, let me ask you something. If you were driving alone on a prairie highway at midnight and saw someone standing by the roadside, staring silently at your headlights, would you stop to help, or would you speed past and never look back? Take a deep breath. And let us ride along the haunted prairie highways of South Dakota. Highway 14 stretches across the landscape as a long, lonely road. By day, it winds through rolling hills, open fields, and patches of dense forest. The asphalt glints in sunlight, and occasional vehicles pass in either direction. Yet even in daylight, there is a sense of isolation. The roadside grasses sway with a rhythm that seems almost alive. And shadows stretch along the road as though holding a memory of what has passed before. As the sun sets, Highway 14 begins to feel different. The landscape darkens quickly, and distant hills fade into black silhouettes. The road seems longer, more narrow. The surrounding fields silent except for the wind moving through tall grasses. Light from passing cars flickers against the pavement, creating a fleeting sense of movement beyond what is visible. At night, the road takes on its most unsettling character. Drivers report seeing a figure walking along the roadside. The person is often described as wearing old-fashioned clothing, attire from another time that feels out of place on a modern highway. The figure moves slowly, deliberately, stepping along the edge of the asphalt as though following an unseen path. When approached, it vanishes, leaving nothing behind but an impression that lingers long after the sighting. Leaving nothing behind but an impression that lingers long after the sighting. Fog sometimes rises suddenly along this stretch of road, even on clear nights. Even on clear nights. Even on clear nights. It creeps in from fields and low-lying areas, curling across the pavement and around headlights. It creeps in from fields and low-lying areas, curling across the pavement and around headlights. Visibility drops, and the familiar landscape becomes distorted. Shadows lengthen and shift, blending with the mist to create shapes that seem alive. Drivers describe the fog as dense yet silent, carrying an almost tangible weight that makes each mile feel longer, each turn more uncertain. Drivers describe the fog as dense yet silent, carrying an almost tangible weight that makes each mile feel longer, each turn more uncertain. Carrying an almost tangible weight that makes each mile feel longer, each turn more uncertain. Each mile feel longer, each turn more uncertain. Each turn more uncertain. The whispers that echo through the tall grasses add another layer of unease. Faint and soft, the voices carry across the road from nowhere in particular. They are unintelligible yet distinct, rising and falling in cadence with the wind. The sound can make a driver pause, heart-quickening, as though the road itself is alive with memory, replaying fragments of conversations from times long past. Some drivers report feeling touches as they pass certain stretches of highway. A hand brushes against a shoulder, a finger grazes an arm. Though there is no one else in the car. The sensation is fleeting, often startling, and impossible to trace. It adds to the sense that Highway 14 is not merely a road, but a place where unseen forces observe and interact with those who travel it. The combination of figure sightings, fog, whispers, and invisible touches creates an immersive experience. The night air carries not just wind, but history and presence. Every mile traveled feels layered with memory, with echoes of people who may have walked or traveled this route in other times, leaving traces that still affect the landscape. Even the roadside itself seems to participate. Tall grasses sway without breeze. Shadows form where no light should reach. And distant hills sometimes appear closer than they are. Headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating patches of road that feel suddenly empty yet charged with energy. The isolation of Highway 14 amplifies these sensations, turning ordinary night driving into an experience of heightened awareness. The stories associated with this stretch of road are varied. Some speak of accidents long ago, others of travelers who vanished or were never found. These tales, passed from driver to driver, add layers to the night experience. Even those unaware of the history often feel the weight of presence, the subtle sense that they are being observed as they move through the dark. Standing still at the side of the road, one can feel the layered atmosphere. The fog drifts, carrying sound in unpredictable directions. Shadows shift between trees and grasses. Whispers rise and fall, almost rhythmic. Drivers passing by are aware of more than the surface road. Each mile feels extended, each bend carrying the potential for the unexpected. By dawn, the environment shifts once more. Fog lifts, shadows retreat, and the landscape returns to familiarity. The figure vanishes with the first light. Whispers fade with the warmth of the sun. The brushes of unseen hands disappear, leaving the road ordinary once again. Daylight reveals the asphalt, the grasses, and the hills in clarity, with no trace of what occurred during the night. Yet those who travel Highway 14 at night carry the memory with them. They remember the fleeting figure, the sudden fog, the whispers from nowhere, and the faint touches that left no explanation. The road is no longer simply asphalt and fields. It becomes a place of attention, awareness, and layered presence, where the line between history, memory, and perception blurs. Highway 14 is more than a route through hills and fields. It is a corridor where past and present seem to intersect. At night, it transforms into a space alive with shadow, sound, and energy, reminding travelers that some roads hold more than what can be seen or measured. The stretch feels timeless, charged with stories and impressions that persist with every journey. Drivers leave this road changed, carrying an impression of isolation, awareness, and subtle mystery. By day, it appears ordinary and safe. By night, it becomes a landscape where history lingers, presence is felt, and the unexpected waits along every bend and through every fog-draped mile. Highway 14 endures as a place where the ordinary meets the unseen, and where the journey itself becomes a conversation with the past. Highway 16 stretches across open plains and rolling hills, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through fields that stretch farther than the eye can see. By day, the highway feels ordinary, framed by grasslands, distant tree lines, and the gentle rise and fall of hills. Sunlight glints off the pavement, and passing vehicles appear at a comfortable distance. Travelers move along its course with ease, the open expanse giving a sense of freedom and space. As dusk falls, the highway begins to change. Shadows lengthen across the road, stretching from hills and roadside vegetation. The air cools more rapidly than expected, and a stillness settles over the plains. The horizon becomes indistinct, blending road, field, and sky into a seamless expanse. The comfort of open space gives way to a feeling of isolation. Travelers driving after dark often report hearing cries coming from the ditches that run alongside the highway. The sounds are faint at first, carried on the wind, but grow distinct as the vehicle approaches. They do not come from any visible source, and stopping or looking offers no explanation. The cries are urgent yet muted, fading as suddenly as they arise, leaving only a lingering sense of unease. Shadowy figures are sometimes seen in the headlights, standing near the edge of the pavement or moving along the fields. Their forms are indistinct, dark against the night, and they vanish the moment the driver slows or approaches. The sudden appearance and disappearance of these figures startles even the most experienced travelers, leaving the highway feeling less like a passage and more like a space occupied by unseen observers. The air itself seems to change in these moments. A chill moves through the vehicle, inexplicable and sudden, pressing against the skin. Windows closed or doors locked do not block it. The cold settles into the chest, creating a heaviness that heightens awareness and sharpens every sound and shadow along the road. The chill fades as the vehicle continues down the road. Radio signals often crackle unexpectedly, filling the cabin with static or fragments of voices that cannot be understood. Even strong signals from familiar stations may distort or fade entirely. The interference is unpredictable, coinciding with the appearance of figures or the sound of distant cries. It adds to the sense that the highway itself is different after dark, imbued with presence and attention that cannot be measured. The landscape amplifies these sensations. Every movement outside the vehicle feels magnified. Travelers describe heightened awareness as they continue along Highway 16. Each mile carries anticipation. The horizon shifts subtly with every turn, and shadows seem to move with a rhythm of their own. The cries from the ditches are intermittent, appearing without pattern, and the figures in the headlights continue to manifest and vanish, reinforcing a sense of constant observation. Some report that slowing or stopping intensifies the experience. Figures appear closer. Sounds carry further, and the chill deepens. Others find that moving steadily, keeping the vehicle in motion, allows the phenomena to remain at a distance. Observed but not overwhelming. Either way, the experience leaves a lasting impression, making the highway feel more like a space of perception than simply a road. Even when no figures are visible and the cries fade, the environment maintains its intensity. The road stretches endlessly. And every glance toward the edge of the pavement carries the possibility of movement. Travelers sense history embedded in the landscape, a residual energy tied to the land, the highway, and those who have passed this route in darkness before. By dawn, Highway 16 resumes its daytime character. Light returns to the fields and hills, shadows shrink and straighten, and the cries and figures disappear entirely. Radio signals stabilize. The air warms, and the road becomes ordinary once more, safe and navigable. Yet for those who drove it after dark, the memory lingers. The sudden chills, shadowy figures, and distant cries remain vivid in memory, a reminder of the highway's other presence. Highway 16 continues to stretch across plains and hills, unchanged in its geography, but profoundly different when night falls. By day, it is a thoroughfare, ordinary and open. By night, it becomes a space of subtle perception. Alive with unseen figures. Distant cries. Cold drafts. And whispered interference. Travelers leave with an awareness that the highway is more than asphalt and distance. It is a place where observation is constant, where shadows and sound converge. And where the landscape itself seems to notice every movement. Highway 16 endures as a corridor of travel by day and a space of mystery and presence by night. Where the ordinary becomes extraordinary under the cloak of darkness. Highway 79 stretches across the open prairie, a ribbon of asphalt surrounded by fields that seem endless. During the day, the road is quiet and exposed, flanked by tall grasses that sway with the wind and the occasional distant tree line. Signs are few, and landmarks are almost non-existent, leaving drivers with only the horizon to judge distance. The sun casts long shadows across the flat terrain, and the sky appears larger here, dominating the landscape with pale blues and drifting clouds. Isolation defines the highway. Travelers quickly sense the emptiness, the way sound carries across open space, and the subtle sway of the grass along the roadside. Wind rustles through weeds and wildflowers, and birds occasionally rise from hidden nests. The road seems alive in its own way, stretching endlessly toward the horizon, a conduit between small towns and spaces largely untouched by human habitation. As evening approaches, the landscape begins to shift. Shadows grow longer across the asphalt, blending with the darkness of roadside ditches and the movement of the wind. The temperature drops, and the prairie takes on a different character. Colors deepen, and the sense of space expands, leaving travelers aware of the vastness surrounding them. The emptiness becomes more pronounced, and a quiet tension settles over the land. At night, Highway 79 becomes unpredictable. People report seeing phantom vehicles moving against traffic. Headlights appear in the distance, approaching slowly along lanes where no vehicle should be present. The shapes are clear at first, but when attention focuses on them, they vanish as if dissolved into the night. Drivers find themselves questioning whether they saw a car, a reflection, or something entirely different. The fleeting presence leaves an impression of motion and awareness beyond ordinary explanation. Hitchhikers sometimes appear along the roadside. Figures stand silently on the edge of the road, often in the distance, their posture still and waiting. When drivers slow or pull over, the figures vanish, leaving only the prairie behind. Observers describe an immediate sense of unease, as if the air itself is aware of their movement. The hitchhikers are neither threatening nor interactive, but their sudden presence and disappearance create tension and a feeling of mystery. The prairie seems alive in other ways as well. Tall grass sways without obvious wind, patterns forming and dissipating with subtle motion. Travelers often describe the sense of being watched, as though eyes are observing from within the dense growth. The sensation is quiet, persistent, and inescapable, lingering even when no figures are present. It creates a feeling that the land itself carries awareness, a presence that exists alongside the road and its travelers. Sounds travel differently at night. The quiet of the prairie amplifies every movement. Insects chirp with sharp clarity. Distant vehicles hum on the asphalt. And the rustle of grass seems almost sentient. Every step on gravel shoulders or soft dirt becomes more pronounced. The combination of emptiness and amplified sound heightens awareness, drawing attention to shapes, movement, and subtle variations in light that might otherwise be ignored. The highway itself feels as if it remembers. It has carried travelers for decades, forming paths through the prairie that align with memory and instinct. The stretches without landmarks are particularly powerful, providing a sense of timelessness, a place where the present, past, and perception converge. Footsteps, headlights, and figures seem layered over one another, creating a space that is both real and subtly unreal. Travelers often pause to process what they see. The phantom vehicles, the disappearing hitchhikers, and the watching prairie leave impressions that linger long after passing a stretch of road. Despite the unsettling phenomena, the highway is not hostile. The presences are subtle, patient, and non-aggressive. They move alongside travelers without interference, appearing and vanishing without threat. The effect is one of awareness rather than danger, a quiet reminder that isolation amplifies perception and that empty spaces carry memory, motion and presence of their own. By morning, the landscape returns to calm. Sunlight reveals the road, the grass, and distant hills with clarity. Phantom figures are gone, headlights have vanished, and the prairie seems still once more. Travelers often pause, looking back at stretches they passed through, noting the contrast between night and day. The emptiness feels different, the land serene yet carrying the echoes of the night. Highway 79 remains both beautiful and mysterious. Its isolated stretches provide space for reflection, wonder, and heightened perception. Phantom vehicles appear. Hitchhikers vanish. And the prairie watches quietly from within its grass. The road stretches endlessly, connecting towns, travelers, and experiences, while holding secrets that only the night reveals. Those who journey along it remember. The phantom movement, the echoes, and the presence of the land linger in thought and memory. Highway 79 is more than asphalt and prairie. It is a living corridor, a space where isolation transforms perception, where the ordinary becomes mysterious, and where the vastness of the prairie holds both beauty and a subtle, enduring presence. Highway 212 stretches through quiet farmland, its asphalt ribbon cutting across open fields and rolling pastures. During the day, the route feels ordinary, lined with crops swaying gently in the breeze, farmhouses set back from the road, and the occasional silo rising against the horizon. The sky stretches wide above, a vast canvas that makes the traveler feel small, yet secure in the familiarity of rural landscapes. As evening approaches, the farmland begins to take on a different character. The sun dips low, shadows lengthen, and the fields darken in subtle gradients of color. The wind carries the scent of earth and growing crops, and the quiet settles deeply, filling the spaces between the occasional sounds of wildlife and distant machinery. On these roads, the ordinary seems to fade, leaving a heightened awareness of the land and the passing car beneath tires that hum softly against the asphalt. It is after sunset that travelers begin to notice the unusual phenomena associated with Highway 212. Faint singing is often reported coming from the fields. The sound is soft and melodic, rising and falling without a clear source. It carries on the wind, drifting across crops and open land. Those who hear it describe a sense of distance and intimacy at the same time, as if the voices are close enough to be understood yet remain just out of reach. The singing is sometimes continuous, sometimes intermittent, but it is always distinct against the quiet backdrop of night. Figures appear along the roadside, another commonly reported experience. At first, they are faint shapes at the edge of vision, silhouettes that move slowly or stand still near fences or tree lines. Travelers have seen them step into the road, pause as if observing, and then vanish before contact can be made. The figures are rarely detailed, their features obscured by darkness and distance, yet their presence is unmistakable. They do not interact with vehicles beyond appearing and disappearing, leaving behind only the impression that somania or somethinga is present. They do not interact with vehicles beyond appearing and disappearing, leaving behind only the impression that somania or somethinga is present. Even more unsettling are the reports of headlights flickering without cause. On stretches of Highway 212, where the road is empty, travelers have noticed their own vehicle lights dimming or flashing briefly. The effect occurs without apparent electrical fault, and without obstruction from branches or moisture. Some describe the flicker as rhythmic, almost in time with other phenomena, while others experience it as sudden and unpredictable. It heightens the sense that the road itself is charged with an unusual presence. The combination of singing, figures, and flickering lights creates an atmosphere that is immersive and difficult to ignore. Each element reinforces the others, producing a heightened awareness of the environment. Shadows appear longer, fields seem to shift subtly, and the line between observation and imagination blurs. Travelers report a growing alertness, a focus on every movement and sound that amplifies the sense of isolation and mystery. The farmland along Highway 212 carries layers of history, which contribute to its character. Generations of farmers worked these fields, roads carried livestock and wagons. And the land has witnessed countless human and natural events. Some believe that the singing and figures are echoes of the past. Memories embedded in the land that surface under the quiet and darkness of night. The lights, too, may be interpreted as reflections of energy left behind by the passage of vehicles and people over decades. Yet explanations rooted in history and environment cannot fully account for the precise experiences reported. The singing remains faint but distinct. Figures appear and vanish. Headlights flicker. Travelers moving slowly along the road report a stronger sense of presence. Shadows along fence lines and between trees seem to linger. The feeling of being observed intensifies. The open land feels charged. This awareness is not hostile, yet it is unmistakable, creating a tension that is subtle but persistent. The quiet of night amplifies every sense, making the smallest detail seem significant. Even brief stops along Highway 212 enhance perception. Stepping out of the vehicle, one may hear the singing more clearly. Notice movement at the edges of vision. And feel the air shift in subtle ways. The wind, temperature, and scent of the field seem to carry meaning. Layering natural elements with the psychological effect of awareness heightened by history and solitude. Leaving the highway brings relief, yet the impressions linger. The shapes along the roadside. And the unexpected flickering of headlights. Memory retains the subtle tension of the road. And the impression that something unseen watches from the darkness. These experiences often stay vivid, returning in quiet moments, long after the journey has ended. Highway 212 is more than a rural road. It is a corridor where the ordinary meets the extraordinary. Where landscape, history, and subtle phenomena converge. For those who travel it after dark, the route is memorable not for danger, but for the sense that the land itself remembers, watches, and speaks in whispers, shadows, and light. Highway 44 stretches across endless grasslands. The landscape is open and vast, the sky meeting the earth in a seamless line of green and gold. By day the road feels ordinary, a route through rural expanse. By night however it becomes something different, a corridor of isolation where the ordinary shifts and perception sharpens. The grasslands on either side of the road rise gently along embankments, swaying with wind. Shadows play across the undulating terrain, lengthening as the sun dips below the horizon. Drivers often notice shapes moving along the edges of vision, just beyond the lines of headlights. They do not approach the road directly, yet their presence is undeniable. Cold winds sweep across vehicles suddenly and sharply. One moment the cabin is still, the air calm, the next a gust presses against doors and windows, chilling skin and rattling metal. The temperature seems to drop locally, focused along sections of road without any natural explanation. Wind carries no storm, no warning, yet its arrival feels deliberate, a sudden intrusion into otherwise calm travel. Many drivers report an accompanying sensation of dread. It is not fear of an accident or natural hazard, but a pressure that bears down from above and around, pressing in from the expanse of sky and land. The sensation grows stronger when shadows appear along the embankments or when the wind intensifies. Drivers describe heightened awareness, every movement and sound magnified, heartbeats quickening in response to the unseen. As heartbeats quickening in response to the unseen. The combination of shadows, wind, and dread creates an immersive environment. Shapes shift in the periphery, sometimes appearing closer, sometimes retreating as if responding to movement. The wind moves unpredictably, carrying sounds, rustling grasses, and faint whispers that may be the imagination, yet feel grounded in reality. Even familiar stretches of road take on a new character at night. The asphalt seems narrower, the horizon farther, and every turn becomes a point of anticipation. Shadows align with embankments and ditches, sometimes forming humanoid outlines that vanish when approached or illuminated fully. Drivers report moments when the road feels watched, not by a person, but by the landscape itself, attentive and reactive. The grasslands contribute to the effect. Their height and density create concealment for shapes and movements. Each slope and ditch amplifies wind and sound, making the ordinary rustle of grass seem larger, more intentional. A single movement can appear as multiple, and shifting light from headlights creates illusions of motion where none exists. The environment is both open and confining, expansive yet intimate in its capacity to induce awareness. Many who traverse Highway 44 at night notice a rhythm to the experience. Wind gusts arrive in irregular intervals, shadows appear and disappear, and the feeling of pressure fluctuates in correspondence. The road seems to respond to attention, subtly guiding movement, influencing perception, and creating a sense that every step along the asphalt is observed. The effect intensifies in areas where the road narrows or curves. Visibility is limited, the darkness deepens, and the sense of isolation grows. Drivers often accelerate instinctively, seeking to leave the section behind, yet every mile traveled seems to carry the same heightened awareness. Those who have driven the highway repeatedly describe consistency in their experiences. The shadows along embankments appear in similar patterns. The gusts of wind arrive with similar suddenness. And the pressure on the chest recurs predictably. Even seasoned travelers find that the combination of environmental cues creates a tension that is difficult to shake, lingering after leaving the road. By dawn, Highway 44 reverts to a familiar landscape. Light illuminates the grasslands, shadows retreat, and wind becomes predictable. The road appears ordinary once again. Yet those who have driven at night recall vividly the fleeting figures along the embankments. The sudden gusts, and the pressing weight of unseen observation. Memory preserves the sensation, keeping the experience alive long after departure. Highway 44 remains a place of paradox. Its 2 lanes are simple, practical, and open, yet at night they transform into a corridor of subtle phenomena. Shadows, wind, and dread combine to create an immersive and disquieting experience that feels alive, aware, and enduring. Drivers emerge with heightened senses, an acute awareness of environment, and a memory of the road as something more than asphalt and grass, a place where isolation and perception converge in quiet, persistent intensity. The grasslands stretch outward endlessly, the sky presses down, and the road continues uninterrupted, carrying travelers through its expanse. Shadowy forms may still move along the embankments. Gusts of wind may still arrive without warning. And the sense of dread may return for those who venture after dark. Highway 44 is ordinary by day. Extraordinary by night. A landscape alive with memory, perception, and subtle presence. That leaves all who traverse it with an unforgettable impression. Highway 83 stretches across open plains and rolling fields, a ribbon of asphalt that has carried travelers for decades. By day, the road appears ordinary, lined with tall grasses swaying in the wind and occasional farmhouses dotting the horizon. Cars and trucks move steadily along the highway, following routes mapped by generations before. Yet even in daylight, there is a quiet sense of history here, a feeling that the land remembers the passage of people, animals, and machines over time. As the sun sets, the landscape takes on a different character. Shadows lengthen across the fields, stretching from fence posts, trees, and distant hills. The wind carries sounds farther than expected, bending the quiet in unusual ways. Every small noise, the hum of tires, the whisper of grass, the call of a bird seems amplified, marking the shift from day to night. At night, Highway 83 reveals a side that few see during daylight hours. Travelers have reported ghostly wagons moving across the open fields adjacent to the road. The wagons appear as faint shapes, sometimes outlined against the moonlight, drawn by unseen horses. They move steadily, deliberately, following paths that seem familiar yet inaccessible. When approached, the wagons fade into shadow, leaving nothing behind except the lingering impression that they were real and purposeful. Alongside these apparitions, voices are sometimes heard whispering names. They come from nowhere in particular, drifting across the fields or rising faintly from the road itself. The whispers are soft, insistent, and disembodied, forming an audible connection to the past. Travelers often pause, listening for patterns or recognition, only to find the sound elusive, fading as quickly as it appears. The atmosphere along Highway 83 at night is dense with attention. Every shadow appears to move subtly. Every gust of wind carries sound in unexpected directions. And even the light from headlights casts long, shifting shapes that feel almost alive. The atmosphere itself seems to be watching. Every move, every step, every breath is magnified, amplified, and distorted, making every moment a living, breathing nightmare. The darkness itself seems to have a presence. Watching, waiting, and judging. And it's not just the darkness. It's the silence, the stillness. The oppressive weight of the unknown. And the creeping sense of dread that hangs over the landscape like a shroud. The atmosphere itself is a living, breathing entity. Watching, waiting, and judging. The darkness closing in. And the sense of impending doom. Many of the reported phenomena are tied to the highway's long history of accidents. Over decades, vehicles have collided, horses and wagons have overturned, and travelers have met with misfortune along this route. Some believe that the energy of these events has left residual impressions on the land, echoes of movement and presence that can still be perceived after dark. Travelers often describe a sensation of being watched as they drive. The effect is not threatening, but it is undeniably present. Shadows along the roadside seem to respond to motion, drifting closer or remaining at a distance in subtle acknowledgement of a passing vehicle. The whispering voices amplify the sensation, creating an environment in which every sound and movement feels meaningful. The ghostly wagons and disembodied voices are often accompanied by other subtle signs. Headlights may reflect off unseen objects in the fields, creating fleeting shapes that vanish before they can be fully understood. The wind may shift suddenly, carrying cool air across the face of the traveler, though no movement in the environment seems to account for it. Even familiar landmarks can appear altered under the moonlight, their outlines softened or distorted. Highway 83 at night is both beautiful and unnerving. The open fields, rolling hills, and distant tree lines are illuminated by stars, casting a pale, ethereal glow across the landscape. The combination of natural beauty and unexplained phenomena creates a sense of tension and wonder. Travelers often slow their vehicles, absorbing the scene, feeling the presence that lingers across the plains. The cumulative effect of these experiences leaves a lasting impression. Drivers report heightened awareness, a sense that the land is attentive, and an acute awareness of movement both seen and unseen. Some choose to take alternate routes after dark, trusting intuition and the subtle cues of the environment. Others continue along the highway, observing the faint wagon shapes and listening for whispers, aware that the road carries stories beyond what can be read on a map. By morning, Highway 83 returns to its familiar appearance. The ghostly wagons leave no trace. The road is simply asphalt, bordered by fields and fences, as it has been for generations. To a new traveler, it appears ordinary, safe, and predictable. Yet those who have driven it at night carry the memory of something beyond ordinary perception. They recall fleeting figures, ghostly movement, and sounds that defy explanation. They remember the way shadows moved in subtle ways and the cold brush of unseen presence across open fields. Highway 83 is more than a road. It is a corridor of history, memory, and lingering energy. By day, it carries vehicles, livestock, and travelers. By night, it carries echoes, shadows, and whispers of those who passed before. The highway reminds those who travel it that land can remember, that some paths are more than asphalt, and that even in the quietest stretches, presence can be felt long after events have passed. Travelers leave with both awe and caution. The highway appears unchanged in daylight. Yet the memory of nighttime journeys lingers. Highway 83 endures as a place where history, perception, and the unseen intersect. Reminding everyone who drives it that even ordinary routes can hold extraordinary mysteries. Highway 212 spur stretches across open prairie, a narrow ribbon of asphalt bordered by fields that roll toward the horizon. By day, it feels remote but ordinary, the tall grasses swaying gently in the wind, and the occasional fence line or abandoned barn marking the landscape. Birds circle lazily overhead, and the sunlight warms the road and surrounding land. Travelers moving through this section often remark on the sense of solitude, the quiet expanse creating a feeling of openness and space that is both calming and isolating. As daylight fades, the atmosphere changes. Shadows lengthen across the prairie, stretching from fences and weathered barns. The contours of the land appear sharper. And the horizon blurs in the dimming light. The stillness grows deeper, filled only by the rustle of grass and the distant call of birds returning to roost. The road itself seems longer. The familiar turns and dips taking on a new and unfamiliar character under fading light. Visitors traveling after sunset report seeing figures along fence lines and near abandoned barns. These shapes often appear briefly, standing silently or moving slowly across the edges of vision. They are dark against the night, undefined in detail, and vanish when approached. The effect is disorienting, giving the impression that the prairie itself is alive with presence and observation. At the same time, lights sometimes appear in the distance. Lights glow faintly at first, like lanterns or the reflection of distant windows, and remain suspended against the horizon. Approaching them often reveals nothing. The lights fade, disappearing into darkness as if they never existed. The combination of figures and lights contributes to the sense that this section of the highway is watched. Travelers describe a sensation of the prairie itself being alive with memory. The land seems to hold the echoes of past events, footsteps, and human presence. Sounds carry farther than expected. A footstep on gravel, a shift of wind through the grass, or the creak of an old fence post takes on amplified significance. Even in the absence of figures or lights, the feeling of history and attention permeates the landscape. The open prairie amplifies perception. Distances appear deceptive in the dark, shadows stretch in unusual ways. And every small movement is noticed. The combination of expansive space and isolation heightens awareness, making ordinary sensations feel charged with meaning. Travelers feel observed, though there is no threat. Only the subtle certainty that the land remembers. Figures and lights do not behave predictably. Shapes may appear closer or farther than expected. Lights may blink, glow, or vanish entirely. The sporadic nature of these phenomena adds to the sense of unpredictability. Each mile along the spur becomes a measure of patience and observation, a careful navigation of both physical and perceptual space. Even the physical environment contributes to the experience. Barns rise like silhouettes against the night sky, their shapes changing with every angle and every flicker of light. The prairie floor itself seems responsive, uneven underfoot, vibrating subtly with the wind or the shifting of gravel and soil. Travelers report sensations beyond sight and sound. Sudden drafts of cold air sweep across the prairie, chilling skin and clothing. A heaviness in the chest is sometimes felt, a subtle pressure that is immediate yet unexplained. These physical sensations amplify awareness, heightening the emotional impact of shadows, figures, and lights along the highway. The overall effect is immersive. Each observation, whether a fleeting figure, a distant glow, or a subtle sound, interacts with perception, memory, and environment to create a layered experience. Travelers become attuned to minute changes in light, sound, and shadow, their attention drawn to subtle movements that might otherwise go unnoticed. By morning, the landscape resumes its ordinary appearance. Sunlight warms the prairie, casting shadows predictably along fences and barns. The road and surroundings appear familiar once more, ordinary and navigable. Yet the impressions of the night remain vivid in memory of the shapes, the lights, the sensation that the prairie itself was attentive. Highway 212 spur continues to stretch across open plains, unchanged in geography but profoundly different under the cover of darkness. By day, it is a passage through solitude and space. By night, it becomes a landscape alive with history, memory, and perception, where shadows, lights, and sensations converge to create an environment that is immersive, enigmatic, and unforgettable. Travelers leave with a heightened awareness of the land and their place within it. The figures along fences, the fleeting lights, the subtle pressure and chills all combine to leave an impression of Highway 212 spur as more than a road. It is a space where memory lingers, the prairie itself watches, and the ordinary transforms into something quietly extraordinary under the night sky. Highway 50 stretches endlessly under open skies, a ribbon of asphalt flanked by desert plains and distant mountains. By day, the landscape feels vast and open, a place where the horizon stretches without interruption. The road is straight and long, offering views that seem to go on forever. Drivers moving across the pavement notice the subtle curves of distant hills, the shimmer of heat rising from black asphalt, and the quiet presence of a land largely untouched by structures or human occupation. The highway carries both isolation and freedom. Sound travels differently along the long straight stretch. Wind sweeps across the open plains, rustling sparse vegetation, and carrying faint noises from miles away. The desert smells of dry earth, sage, and stone. And the horizon dominates the sense of scale. Drivers often feel small, suspended between earth and sky, with only the road to guide them. As evening approaches, the air cools and the shadows lengthen. The sun sinks slowly behind distant ridges, casting elongated shapes across the pavement. Colors shift from gold and red to muted blues and grays. The sense of isolation deepens, and familiar objects take on unfamiliar shapes as light diminishes. The highway, already vast and empty, seems to expand further in perception, creating both awe and unease for those traveling along it. After night falls, the highway changes again. Drivers report seeing figures appear in their headlights, standing on the road or along the shoulders. The shapes are human in outline, yet they vanish instantly when approached. One moment they are visible, clearly defined against asphalt or desert. And the next, there is nothing. These brief appearances create a startling contrast against the empty road, leaving drivers questioning what they have seen. And how it could vanish so quickly. Footsteps are sometimes heard on empty shoulders. The sound is distinct, echoing against asphalt and rock, but there is no one present. Each step carries a measured weight, sometimes following the movement of the vehicle, sometimes appearing in patterns that do not match any nearby path. The footsteps rise and fall in rhythm with the wind, creating a sensation that something or something is accompanying the traveler. Radios sometimes pick up faint voices. Static hums in the cabin, interrupted by distant, whispered words. The voices are low, fragmented, and seem to call out directly to the driver. They cannot be traced to nearby sources, and their clarity varies as the vehicle moves down the highway. The sound feels intentional, subtle, and unnerving, as though the road itself is aware of the presence of those who pass along it. Time seems to slow along the highway at night. Every mile stretches longer than expected. Shadows on the shoulders, brief glows from distant headlights. And the whispering in the radio amplify perception. Drivers report a heightened awareness of the surrounding desert, of the road itself, and of their own movement through it. The vast openness contributes to the sense of unease. There are few landmarks, no structures, and little reference for orientation. The emptiness is a canvas for perception, shaping experiences that are subtle, fleeting, and persistent. Despite the unsettling phenomena, Highway 50 does not threaten. The figures do not approach aggressively, the footsteps do not follow into the vehicle, and the voices do not demand action. The footsteps do not follow into the vehicle, and the voices do not demand action. And the voices do not demand action. Instead, the experience is one of presence, observation, and awareness. Is a reminder of the scale of the land, the isolation of the road, and the thin boundary between perception and reality along empty stretches of highway. And the thin boundary between perception and reality along empty stretches of highway. Drivers describe lingering effects after leaving the area. Drivers describe lingering effects after leaving the area. Even in daylight, the memory of figures, footsteps, and whispering persists. Shadows seem deeper, roads feel longer, and the horizon more vast. The experience becomes part of the perception of travel, a lasting impression of a place where isolation and observation intersect in subtle but undeniable ways. By morning, the highway appears unchanged. Sunlight warms the asphalt, shadows retreat, and the desert landscape returns to calm. Vehicles travel freely along the straight stretch. And the figures, footsteps, and voices vanish into memory. The land seems ordinary once more, yet those who have experienced the night understand that Highway 50 carries presence beyond what is immediately visible. Its straight stretches under open skies provide freedom, solitude, and reflection. Yet at night, it reveals layers of experience that are subtle, fleeting, and compelling. Figures vanish, footsteps echo, and voices speak through static, creating an environment that is alive with perception and memory. Drivers move through the desert carrying both the road and the sensation of presence with them. Highway 50 remains a corridor of both travel and awareness. It is a place where isolation amplifies perception, where the open land carries echoes of movement, and where subtle phenomena leave lasting impressions. Where the open land carries echoes of movement, and where subtle phenomena leave lasting impressions. And where subtle phenomena leave lasting impressions. The road that is more than asphalt, more than distance, and more than it first appears. Stretches through open fields and rolling countryside, a ribbon of asphalt that has seen countless travelers over the decades. Appears ordinary, lined with cornfields, pastures, and occasional farmhouses. Carries the scent of earth and grass, and the horizon seems endless under the vast sky. Pass steadily, each tire on the road a reminder of movement, routine, and distance traveled. Even during daylight, the highway carries history. Decades ago, accidents occurred here, leaving a mark on the landscape and in local memory. The stories of sudden collisions, overturned vehicles, and frantic moments have woven themselves into the identity of the road. These events are long past, yet their resonance lingers in the quiet stretches, in the way the road bends and dips, and in the awareness of travelers who pass through after dusk. As evening falls, the atmosphere changes. Shadows stretch across the fields, and the horizon darkens into deep blues and purples. The wind moves through crops and grasses, carrying a subtle chill. Sounds of birds and wildlife diminish, leaving the hum of tires and engines as the dominant noise. In this quiet, Highway 34 takes on a different character, one where attention sharpens and the imagination heightens with every passing mile. Travelers report hearing the unmistakable sound of tires skidding along asphalt. The noise is sudden, brief, and echoes in the air, as if a vehicle has lost control nearby. It is startling because no car is present, no skid marks follow, and the road remains empty. The sound fades quickly into silence, leaving only a sense of unease, a reminder of past events that shaped this place. The moment is vivid, real in perception, yet inexplicable in origin. Shadowy figures are another common phenomenon. They appear suddenly, crossing the highway in the distance. At first, they are vague, dark forms against the fading light. They move steadily and purposefully, yet as travelers approach or attempt to focus on them, the figures vanish. There is no trace of footprints or disturbance, only the impression that something crossed the road just moments before. These appearances are fleeting but consistent across multiple reports, lending a sense of authenticity to the experiences. Many who traverse the road at night describe the feeling of being watched from the surrounding fields. The darkness between crops and along tree lanes seems alive with attention. Eyes are not seen, yet the perception is immediate and persistent. This sensation is subtle, pressing gently against awareness rather than triggering fear, but it leaves a lasting impression of observation and caution. The combination of skidding tires, shadowy figures, and the feeling of being observed creates a heightened awareness. The movement of grasses in the wind, the changing light along the horizon. Each turn, dip, and curve feels more pronounced, as if the road itself is alive with memory and presence. Historical context deepens these experiences. Highway 34 has been the site of accidents for decades. Vehicles lost control, collisions occurred, and emergency responses brought life and urgency to otherwise quiet stretches. Locals speak of these events with subdued reverence, recognizing that the highway carries the weight of memory as much as asphalt. The phenomenon of skidding tires and fleeting figures may be connected to these residual impressions, echoes of moments frozen in perception over time. The road's geography also contributes. Open fields allow sounds to carry unexpectedly, while dips and rises in terrain create visual distortions in low light. Shadows lengthen and deepen along tree lanes and fence posts. The combination of past events and environmental conditions enhances the perception of presence, movement, and sound, producing experiences that feel both real and enigmatic. Travelers describe a sequence of sensations when these phenomena occur. First comes the auditory perception, the sudden screech of tires echoing into emptiness. Then, visual attention shifts to the road, where a shadowy figure may appear briefly before vanishing. Finally, the subtle awareness of eyes watching from the fields adds an emotional depth, a sensation of being part of a layered landscape that combines history, environment, and perception. Even after leaving Highway 34, the memory remains. The sound of tires, the fleeting figures, and the sense of observation linger in the mind, vivid and detailed. Travelers recall the quiet stretches of road, the stretch of asphalt disappearing into darkness, and the impression that something unseen continues to exist alongside them. The road becomes more than a physical route, it becomes an experience of history, memory, and subtle presence. Highway 34 is both ordinary and extraordinary. By night, it becomes a corridor where the past and present coexist, where subtle phenomena heighten awareness, and where travelers confront the impression of residual memory left by events long ago. The skidding tires, shadowy figures, and watching eyes offer a quiet, immersive experience. reminding those who pass through that this road holds stories, attention, and presence that linger long after the journey ends. For those who traverse it carefully, Highway 34 provides more than a path from one point to another. It offers a lesson in observation, perception, and respect for the layers of history embedded in the landscape. The road is alive not in motion, but in memory, shadow, and sound, waiting for those willing to notice the subtle marks left by time and experience. Highway 18 stretches across rolling prairie, a quiet ribbon of asphalt winding through tall grasses and open skies. The road sees little traffic, and the horizon appears endless, with only gentle rises and dips breaking the flatness of the landscape. During the day, the highway feels peaceful, isolated but calm. By night, however, it becomes something different, a place where the ordinary bends and perception sharpens in unexpected ways. Travelers often notice figures along the roadside. They appear kneeling beside the pavement, still and motionless, as if engaged in private acts of devotion or contemplation. Approaching them yields nothing. The figures vanish, leaving only empty prairie and the faint rustle of wind across the grass. Their presence is brief yet haunting, leaving an impression of watchfulness and solemnity. Lights flash intermittently along the highway. They appear without source, sudden bursts of brightness that reflect off asphalt or rearview mirrors. Drivers often feel the lights are deliberate, timed with movement or attention, yet there is no explanation. The effect is disorienting, drawing focus outward while amplifying the sense of isolation. Within vehicles, cold spots appear suddenly, as if someone entered without opening doors. The air chills sharply in specific areas, brushing against skin and settling in pockets near passengers or the driver. The temperature returns to normal within moments, yet the sensation is unmistakable. It is subtle, yet persistent, creating a tension that lingers long after the moment passes. The combination of kneeling figures, sudden lights, and cold air creates a layered experience that heightens awareness. Ordinary driving becomes extraordinary. Every movement, glance, and shift in the environment feels significant. Shadows lengthen in unusual ways, and sound carries differently across the prairie, enhancing perception of space and depth. Even a simple gust of wind seems charged with intention. Travelers describe the highway as both open and confining. The expanse of prairie allows vision to stretch for miles, yet the phenomena make the space feel alive, responsive, and attentive. The kneeling figures, cold spots, and flashes of light appear more pronounced at night, when darkness amplifies shadows and sharp contrasts. Every turn, dip, and rise in the asphalt feels heightened, drawing attention to subtle details that are easily missed by day. The prairie itself contributes to the effect. Tall grasses sway with wind, creating shifting patterns of shadow and light. Dips and rises in the terrain alter perspective, making forms appear closer or farther than they are. Even distant sounds such as animal calls, wind in the grass, or the hum of tires on asphalt gain unexpected resonance. The landscape becomes an active participant, shaping perception and enhancing the impression of presence. The landscape becomes an active participant, shaping perception and enhancing the impression of presence. The landscape becomes an active participant, shaping perception and enhancing the impression of presence. Even distant sounds such as animal calls, wind in the grass, or the hum of tires on asphalt gain unexpected resonance. The landscape becomes an active participant, shaping perception and enhancing the impression of presence. The landscape becomes an active participant, shaping perception and enhancing the impression of presence. Highway 18 at night is marked by rhythm. The figures appear intermittently, kneeling along separate stretches. Lights flash in unpredictable sequences. Cold spots emerge in vehicles without warning. Travelers moving along the road feel a cadence imposed by these occurrences, a subtle synchronization that guides attention without explanation. Every moment is heightened, measured, and filled with awareness of the surrounding environment. The highway does not threaten. There are no collisions, no direct confrontations, no aggression. Yet the phenomena evoke unease, a steady awareness that the ordinary rules of space and isolation do not fully apply. The kneeling figures, sudden lights, and cold pockets combine to create an immersive, unforgettable experience. Those who linger along the road report a lasting impression. The moments of observation. The subtle pressures in vehicles. And the fleeting figures. Create memories that persist long after departure. The prairie itself seems to hold these experiences. Layered into the road, the grass, and the subtle undulations of terrain. The environment is active, responsive, and enduring. Shaping perception and experience for every traveler who passes. The moments of observation, the subtle pressures in vehicles, and the fleeting figures. By dawn, Highway 18 returns to a familiar appearance. The prairie glows in morning light, shadows retreat. And the highway appears ordinary. Kneeling figures are gone. Lights no longer flash without source. Cold air dissipates with the warming day. Yet the memory of the night persists. Travelers recall each fleeting figure, each sudden flash, and every unexpected chill. The experience remains vivid. A reminder that the highway is not simply a route, but a space alive with perception and history. Highway 18 continues to run across rolling prairie, open and sparsely traveled. Its phenomena, kneeling figures, sudden lights, and cold spots remain part of the landscape, subtle and pervasive. Travelers who drive it after dark encounter more than asphalt and grass, they encounter a space alive with memory, presence, and quiet intensity. The highway asks attention, respect, and awareness, leaving all who traverse it with a lingering impression of its subtle, mysterious life. As a wide, open corridor, bordered by flat plains and distant hills. The guardrails gleaming in sunlight. And the openness gives a sense of freedom to travelers passing through. There is a subtle emptiness. Is vast and silent. Along its asphalt. As evening approaches, the atmosphere shifts. The sun dips low, casting long shadows across the pavement. The colors fade, and the wide expanses of grass and fields take on muted tones, blending together under the sky. The air grows still, the usual sounds of passing cars and birds diminish, and the landscape feels simultaneously empty and alive. Nightfall transforms the bypass further. Travelers report hearing whispers carried on the wind. The sound is soft, sometimes forming words, sometimes only indistinct murmurs. It drifts across the road, through the guardrails, and along the shoulder, creating the impression that something or something is present even when the road is empty. The whispers are never threatening but insistently present, subtle enough to make one pause and listen carefully. Apparitions have been reported along the guardrails. Shadowy figures appear and disappear without warning. Moving just beyond the edge of headlights or glimpsed out of the corner of the eye. Their movements are deliberate, gliding along the roadside as if following a path invisible to the living. When approached, the figures vanish, leaving nothing behind, yet the impression of presence lingers long after they are gone. Some travelers describe feeling a presence riding alongside them. It is not a force that pushes or pulls, but a subtle awareness. Sometimes only a few seconds, but it leaves a lasting impression. Of being observed, acknowledged, and accompanied by something unseen. The combination of wide openness and isolation amplifies these experiences. The absence of nearby structures or lights allows sounds to travel farther and shadows to appear more vivid. Every movement of the wind, every shift of clouds, and every distant sound becomes perceptible, creating a heightened sense of awareness. Travelers notice even small details of the shimmer of metal, the glint of reflectors, the swaying of roadside grass, and they often feel these details have intention beyond mere coincidence. The history of the bypass adds depth to its reputation. Long stretches have seen accidents and sudden incidents, leaving traces of human presence etched into memory. Some believe that these events have left impressions on the land, a subtle echo of what has passed through this corridor over the years. The whispers, apparitions, and sensed presence are often associated with these echoes, a residual energy that surfaces when the road is quiet and the night is deep. Driving along Highway 212 bypass after dark requires attentiveness. Headlights illuminate only a fraction of the surroundings, making peripheral vision more sensitive. Every shadow along the guardrail can seem meaningful, every flicker of light amplified in perception. The experience engages all senses of sight, sound, touch, and intuition, creating an awareness that the road is more than asphalt and painted lines. Fog and wind can enhance the feeling of presence. A low mist may roll across the lanes, refracting headlights and creating shifting shapes. Wind gusts arrive suddenly, brushing across the car or shifting loose debris. These natural effects often coincide with reported phenomena, amplifying the impression that the environment is alive and observing. The night stretches along Highway 212 bypass with a slow, deliberate rhythm. The combination of emptiness, wind, and echoes produces a sense of isolation, making even routine travel feel heightened. And that the land itself holds attention as the road continues into darkness. By dawn, the bypass returns to its familiar appearance. Shadows recede, the whispers vanish, and the apparitions disappear. The openness of the landscape becomes peaceful again. And the horizon stretches in calm clarity. Vehicles travel freely along the lanes without incident. And the air loses the subtle tension of night. Yet those who have traversed Highway 212 bypass after dark remember differently. They recall the figures along the guardrails, the whispers in the wind, and the subtle sense of presence riding alongside. These impressions linger, leaving the road imbued with memory and awareness that persists even in daylight. Highway 212 bypass is more than a stretch of road. It is a corridor where history, perception, and presence intersect. By day, it appears open and ordinary, a passage between points. By night, it becomes a space alive with subtle energy, whispers, and fleeting forms, reminding travelers that even the most familiar routes can carry stories, echoes, and a consciousness that lingers just beyond sight. Travelers leave with both awe and caution. The highway endures as a place where openness and isolation amplify memory and presence. Where the land itself seems aware, and where night reveals layers invisible to the casual observer. Highway 212 bypass remains wide, desolate, and unforgettable. A road where the ordinary intersects with the unseen. Highway 83 connector stretches through open fields and rolling countryside, a narrow, rarely traveled road that winds past abandoned farm buildings and quiet pastures. By day, it feels remote but ordinary, bordered by fences, overgrown ditches, and the occasional grove of trees. Sunlight glints off weathered barns and the cracked asphalt, revealing the passage of time and the solitude of the land. Travelers during daylight experience a calm isolation, a space removed from traffic and noise, where the rhythm of the landscape feels measured and predictable. As evening falls, the highway begins to change. Shadows stretch across fields and fence lines, darkening the hollows around abandoned barns. The road appears longer in the fading light, with distant structures and tree lines blending into darkness. The familiar becomes strange, and the quiet that was once soothing begins to feel heavy, charged with unseen attention. Drivers who traverse the connector after dark often report seeing shadowy figures near abandoned farm buildings. These shapes are human-like but undefined. Standing motionless along the edges of barns, fences, and tree lines. They appear suddenly, sometimes in the beams of headlights, and vanish when approached or observed directly. The experience is fleeting yet unforgettable, leaving a sense of being watched even after the shapes disappear. In addition to figures, lights are sometimes seen in empty windows of deserted barns and farmhouses. They glow softly, briefly illuminating weathered wood and broken glass, then fade as the vehicle nears. The lights give the impression of occupancy where none exists, a presence that is both subtle and unnerving. There is no source, no lantern or electrical supply. The lights are inexplicable, appearing and vanishing without pattern or warning. Travelers often describe a feeling of intense fear and unease along the connector. The combination of shadowy figures, glowing windows, and the quiet of the surrounding fields creates a psychological tension that is difficult to shake. The road seems alive in perception, responsive to movement and attention. And every sound, from wind rustling in trees to the distant call of animals, is amplified in the mind. The environment enhances these sensations. Rolling fields distort sightlines, creating pockets of darkness that obscure familiar features. The open spaces make movement and sound more noticeable, and the isolation removes the comfort of nearby activity or witnesses. Every step of the journey feels heightened, every mile carries expectation. Some drivers report that stopping along the connector intensifies the experience. Figures may appear closer, lights in windows grow brighter, and the feeling of observation deepens. Motionless air, distant shadows, and intermittent light combine to create a profound awareness of the environment, producing a tension that is physical as well as psychological. Even when no figures are seen and no lights appear, the highway retains a weight. The abandoned buildings, empty fields, and quiet stretches of asphalt create an atmosphere that is heavy with memory and presence. Travelers feel the history of the land, the echoes of lives that once occupied the farms, and the residual attention of the structures themselves. The environment seems to record and reflect movement, adding to the sense that the highway is more than simply a road. The combination of visual, auditory, and emotional cues creates a layered, immersive experience. Headlights cut through darkness, illuminating patches of field, fence, or barn, only to reveal emptiness. The sound of tires on asphalt, the rush of wind, and the faint calls of nocturnal wildlife blend with perception, creating moments where the ordinary and the extraordinary intersect. Travelers are acutely aware of every movement and sound, unsure of what is real and what is suggested by the landscape. By morning, Highway 83 connector returns to its daytime character. Sunlight warms the fields, shadows shrink. And abandoned buildings appear empty and inert. The lights are gone, the figures have vanished. And the air feels ordinary again. The road is safe, navigable, and familiar. Yet those who drove it after dark remember the intensity of the night. The fear, unease, and sensation of presence linger, leaving a lasting impression that transforms memory of the highway. Highway 83 connector continues to stretch through quiet countryside, unchanged in its geography but profoundly different under cover of darkness. By day, it is a passage through rolling fields and abandoned farms, calm and unremarkable. By night, it becomes a landscape alive in perception, where figures appear and vanish, lights glow inexplicably, and the prairie itself feels attentive. For travelers who drive it after dark, the experience is unforgettable. Every shadow, every glow, every subtle sound combines to create a sense of presence, history, and observation. Highway 83 connector is more than asphalt and scenery. It is a space where memory lingers, where the environment watches, and where the ordinary road transforms into a journey through subtle mystery under the night sky. Highway 14 spur winds through stretches of tall grass, a narrow section of asphalt that feels removed from the world around it. By day, sunlight pours over the roadway, illuminating the swaying vegetation on either side and casting long shadows across the pavement. The highway is straight in parts, curved in others, and framed by an endless horizon of green and gold. Drivers passing through notice the isolation, the way sound carries across the grass, and the subtle rhythm of wind moving through stalks taller than most people. The section feels both open and enclosed at the same time. The tall grass flanking the road obscures view, creating a sense that movement might be hidden just beyond sight. Sounds echo differently here, carried along the narrow strip of asphalt and bouncing against the vegetation. Birds call occasionally, leaves rustle with wind, and the surface of the road stretches into the distance without interruption, giving the sense that it might never end. Shadows lengthen along the roadside, darkening the narrow corridor of asphalt. The wind grows cooler, rustling grass in patterns that seem to shift independently of the natural flow. Light fades quickly, and the familiar contours of the road feel altered. The highway stretches and bends in ways that the eye struggles to judge, creating a sense of disorientation and heightened awareness. After nightfall, the highway takes on a different presence. Figures sometimes appear walking along the roadside. They are vague, outlined against darkness, and disappear when approached directly. Observers describe the forms as human in shape, but fleeting in detail, moving along the edges of the asphalt or among the grass. The figures seem unaware of vehicles or travelers. Yet their presence is unmistakable, leaving a lingering impression long after they vanish. Sounds carry differently here at night. Faint cries and laughter sometimes rise from the grass, drifting across the road. The voices are soft, distant, and ephemeral, rising and fading as if carried by the wind. The origin is never clear. The combination of figures and sound amplifies perception. The tall grass obscures the horizon, shadows shift, and the wind moves unpredictably. The narrow highway seems longer than it should, stretching farther with every passing mile. Familiar landmarks appear altered, distant features take on new shapes. And the ordinary rhythm of travel is interrupted by subtle, unexplainable phenomena. Travelers often pause instinctively. They notice movement in the corners of their vision, hear sounds that cannot be traced, and sense a presence along the roadside that is neither threatening nor fully visible. The experience is immersive, drawing attention to every subtle detail, a shift in shadow, a sound of movement in the grass, or a figure glimpsed and gone in an instant. The highway itself feels alive. The stretch of asphalt, bordered by grass and obscured by darkness, seems to respond to presence. Figures appear and vanish, cries and laughter rise without source. Cries and laughter rise without source, and the road stretches in ways that challenge perception. A subtle impression that the highway has memory and intent, marking those who pass through it. Despite the unease, there is no aggression. The phenomena are subtle and fleeting. Figures do not approach aggressively, sounds do not escalate, and the highway remains traversable. The tall grass adds to the disorientation. Its movement with the wind, the way shadows fall and shift, and the sounds that carry differently in narrow corridors create an environment that feels alive. By dawn, the highway returns to calm. Sunlight warms the asphalt and illuminates the grass. Figures vanish, and the distant horizon appears ordinary. Sounds of wildlife replace the faint cries and laughter of night. The stretch of road seems familiar once more. Yet travelers remember the shapes, sounds, and the unsettling sense that the highway stretches longer than it should. Highway 14 Spur remains a place of beauty and mystery. Its narrow corridor, bordered by tall grass, offers solitude, reflection, and the experience of space stretched and altered by night. Figures appear and vanish, footsteps echo along shoulders, and voices rise briefly from nowhere. Travelers who journey through the night carry memory of a highway alive with subtle motion and presence, a place where isolation amplifies perception and every mile feels both familiar and strange. Those who pass through after dark remember the experience. The highway stretches beyond expectation, shadows shift and vanish, and the grass seems to watch. It is a place where beauty meets subtle unease, where perception is heightened, and where the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Highway 14 Spur endures as both a roadway and a living landscape, a stretch of asphalt where mystery and motion converge beneath open skies. Highway 18 alternate winds through rolling hills and open prairies, a stretch of asphalt cutting across fields that seem to stretch endlessly in every direction. During daylight, the landscape is pastoral and serene. The horizon is wide and uninterrupted, with gentle rises and dips in the terrain. Wild grasses sway in the breeze, farm fences stretch in straight lines, and the sky above appears vast and uninterrupted. Travelers moving along the road experience a sense of openness, the simplicity of the land grounding each journey in rhythm and space. As the sun lowers and the day fades into dusk, the character of Highway 18 alternate begins to shift. Shadows lengthen across the rolling terrain. The outlines of hills grow sharper. And the gentle breeze carries the distant calls of birds returning to roost. It is in this quiet that subtle phenomena begin to emerge, heightening perception and awareness. One of the most commonly reported experiences is the flickering of headlights. Drivers traveling along the route sometimes notice their own headlights dimming or flashing, as if responding to an unseen presence. The effect is brief, unpredictable, and occurs when no other vehicles are nearby. Even when traveling slowly and carefully, the flicker appears without apparent cause, leaving a sudden sense of disorientation and heightened attention. It is subtle yet persistent, creating a sense that the environment itself is charged with memory or energy. Figures appear intermittently in the fields alongside the highway. They are fleeting and faint, silhouetted against the darkening landscape. Observers describe seeing them standing or walking across the tall grasses, often disappearing suddenly as if absorbed by the night. These figures are rarely detailed, their features obscured by distance and darkness, yet their presence is unmistakable. They appear independent of movement in vehicles or nearby structures, their appearance tied instead to the quiet, open land itself. The road and surrounding prairies seem to amplify awareness in other ways. Travelers often report that the air grows thick and heavy, pressing subtly against the senses. It is not discomforting in a dramatic way, but noticeable enough to slow breathing and sharpen perception. The effect is most pronounced in low-light conditions, when shadows lengthen and the openness of the prairie makes every sound, movement, and flicker of light stand out. These experiences combine to create a heightened state of attention. Drivers notice the texture of the asphalt beneath tires, the movement of grass along fence lines, and the shifting contours of the hills. Even subtle environmental quasi a rustle, a brief glow, or a shadow in the corner of the eye carry significance. The combination of vast space, quiet, and occasional phenomena produces a sense of intimacy with the landscape, despite its openness. History may play a role in the character of Highway 18 alternate. Accidents and incidents have been recorded along stretches of the road. And the long history of human activity in the area leaves subtle imprints in the memory of the land. Some suggest that the flickering lights, fleeting figures, and heavy air are echoes of past events. Residual impressions carried forward in time and space. The road becomes more than a physical path. It is a conduit for memory and perception layered upon the natural landscape. Travelers describe a rhythm to the experiences. Headlights flicker unexpectedly, drawing attention to the road. Shadows in fields suggest movement, inviting observation without clarity. The air thickens, encouraging focus on surroundings. These elements do not occur simultaneously, but their cumulative effect creates a continuous awareness that engages sight, sound, and sensation. The experience is immersive, drawing travelers into a heightened state where ordinary perception and subtle phenomena converge. The geography of the highway contributes to these perceptions. Rolling hills and open fields allow sound to travel unusually far, while dips in the terrain obscure vision and create optical effects in low light. Shadows stretch differently across uneven ground, and wind moving through grasses can produce faint noises that carry unpredictably. While environmental factors may explain portions of the experiences, They do not account fully for the consistency of reports across travelers and nights. Remaining on Highway 18 alternate after dark accentuates these effects. Silence deepens, shadows grow more pronounced. And subtle movements become increasingly noticeable. Figures along the roadside appear more vividly, lights seem to flicker with intent. And the thickened air becomes tangible. Each mile traveled feels more deliberate, as though the road itself demands awareness. Guiding attention to the interplay of landscape, perception, and memory. Leaving the highway brings relief, yet the impressions remain. Drivers recall the flickering lights, the fleeting figures, and the sensation of thickened air pressing against them. The road lingers in memory, vivid and detailed, reminding travelers that it is more than a passage between points. It is a space where the ordinary and extraordinary converge, where perception is heightened, and where the land itself seems to hold watch over those who move through it. Highway 18 alternate is at once familiar and enigmatic. Its open prairies and rolling hills provide calm and beauty. Yet subtle phenomena. Flickering headlights, transient figures, and heavy aura imbue the route with a quiet mystery. Travelers experience the road in ways that blend observation, history, and perception, leaving them with a lasting awareness of a landscape that is alive not just in form, but in memory, presence, and subtle movement. Highway 50 spur stretches straight and isolated across the dark landscape, a narrow ribbon of asphalt cutting through open terrain. The road sees little traffic, and the surrounding land is empty, punctuated only by occasional trees or distant hills. At night, the highway transforms. The ordinary quiet of the countryside gives way to a tension that is almost tangible, as if the land itself is aware of those who travel its length. Travelers report figures appearing suddenly on the roadway. They stand motionless, sometimes near the center of the lane, sometimes along the shoulder. Their forms are dark and indistinct, silhouettes against the night. Approaching them, headlights cast their beams wide, yet the figures vanish without a trace. There is no sound of movement, no indication of retreat. They simply disappear, leaving only the black asphalt and the sense of something having been there. Fog rises unexpectedly along sections of the highway. The air is clear, the next a dense mist creeps along the road. And into the surrounding grass. Visibility drops quickly, obscuring landmarks and stretching shadows into abstract shapes. The fog seems to move with intention, curling around headlights, enveloping trees, and drifting along the road. Drivers often slow instinctively, unsure whether the movement is wind or something more. Occasionally, the sound of phantom horses fills the air. There is no visual confirmation, yet the pounding of hooves resonates across the roadway and surrounding terrain. The noise is sharp, echoing against distant hills, yet impossible to locate precisely. Rises and falls in irregular intervals, creating a rhythm that feels both ancient and immediate. Travelers describe it as startling, a sound out of time, carrying the weight of presence without form. The weight of presence without form. The combination of figures, fog, and phantom sounds creates an immersive and unsettling environment. The road becomes more than asphalt, it transforms into a corridor where perception is heightened and ordinary rules of travel seem suspended. Every movement is amplified, and shadows stretch unnaturally, and the fog alters the sense of distance and speed. Even familiar landmarks along the highway appear altered at night. Ditches, trees, and hills take on new shapes in the shifting mist. The disappearing figures seem to appear where the road curves or along straight stretches where expectation should dominate. Heightening tension with each passing mile. Drivers often describe a rhythm to the experience. A figure appears. Fog drifts. Hooves echo. The sequence does not follow a predictable pattern. Yet it creates a cadence. An awareness that the road is responsive to the presence of those traveling it. Pauses and accelerations in the encounter feel synchronized with observation. heightening alertness and amplifying the impression of being watched. An awareness that the road is responsive to the presence of those traveling it. The land itself contributes to the effect. Rolling terrain and open fields carry sound in unusual ways, allowing whispers, hooves, or distant footsteps to travel far across the plains. Trees and fences create unexpected echoes, and the mist distorts both light and distance, making shapes appear closer or larger than they are. Even the stars in the night sky can appear to shimmer differently over the road, casting light that accentuates shadows along the asphalt. Highway 50 spur does not threaten travelers directly. There is no collision, no movement toward them, no aggression. Yet the perception feels grounded. Every shadow a point of consideration. The phenomena are often most intense in sections where the road is narrow or elevated. The fog thickens, figures appear more distinctly, and the echo of hooves grows sharper. The sense of isolation is magnified. Travelers describe tension that is steady and persistent, a presence that does not leave until the journey is complete. Even after leaving the road, memories of the night linger, flashes of form, sound, and mist that remain vivid and unshakable. By dawn, the highway appears ordinary once again. Light restores clarity, shadows retract, and fog dissipates. The land seems quiet, indifferent, and empty. The phantom figures have vanished. The sounds of hooves fade into memory, and the air returns to normal. Yet for those who traveled the highway at night, the experience remains alive. They recall the figures kneeling on asphalt, the mist rising unexpectedly, and the rhythm of hooves echoing across the plains. Highway 50 spur continues to run across the open countryside, isolated, straight, and quiet by day. At night, it transforms into a corridor of observation and awareness, where figures appear, fog rises, and phantom sounds echo across the land. Travelers encounter more than pavement and grass, they encounter a space that is alive with memory, perception, and subtle presence, a place where attention is demanded and ordinary perception is suspended in the darkness. Highway 16 alternate stretches through rolling hills and quiet forests, a road that feels both familiar and isolated. By day, it carries local traffic, trucks, and travelers passing through the landscape. Sunlight glints off guardrails, and the asphalt reflects the warmth of midday. Fields and patches of woodland line the roadside, creating a sense of calm and open space. Even in daylight, there is a subtle tension in certain stretches. Long, empty stretches of road appear suddenly between hills. The air feels still, carrying only the faint rustle of leaves and the hum of distant engines. The isolation becomes more noticeable as the road twists and bends, and the horizon stretches endlessly. As evening falls, the character of Highway 16 alternate begins to shift. Shadows lengthen and deepen, blending with the darkness of the forest. The air grows cooler, and a stillness settles over the landscape. Every sound is amplified: the scrape of tires on gravel, the whisper of wind through trees, and the faint creak of guardrails. Travelers report a heightened awareness, a sense that the road itself is attentive to those moving along it. One of the most persistent legends of this highway is that of ghostly hitchhikers. Drivers recount stories of seeing a figure standing alone at the roadside. The person appears as a silhouette against the dimming light, often dressed in clothing that seems slightly outdated, evoking a sense of another era. Those who stop to pick up the figure report a moment of quiet conversation or shared glance, only for the seat to be empty moments later. No one ever remains, and the impression of presence lingers long after the encounter. Alongside these sightings, travelers report hearing footsteps echoing behind cars on stretches of road that are otherwise empty. The steps come steadily, rhythmic and unmistakable, yet no other vehicle or person is visible. Some drivers describe glancing in the rearview mirror to find nothing, yet the sound persists briefly, fading slowly into the night. The effect is disorienting, amplifying the feeling of isolation and attention from unseen forces. The combination of ghostly figures, footsteps, and the quiet stillness of the road creates a uniquely immersive experience. Highway 16 alternate feels alive in subtle ways. Shadows seem to shift just beyond vision, reflecting and refracting in the dim glow of headlights. The forest edges appear to lean closer to the asphalt, as if observing movement. The long stretches of road feel as though they stretch further at night than during the day. Fog sometimes rolls in along the highway after sunset. Drifts across the lanes and through the trees, muffling sound and bending light. Visibility drops, and the silhouettes of the forest become shifting forms in the mist. The footsteps and fleeting figures often coincide with the presence of fog, enhancing the sense that something moves independently of the human eye. The highway's history adds depth to these experiences. Accidents and tragedies have occurred along its stretches, and stories of travelers who disappeared or were injured in earlier decades persist in local memory. Some believe that the energy of these events remains in the landscape, manifesting as sightings, sounds, and sensations experienced by night travelers. The ghostly hitchhikers and echoing footsteps may be the imprint of past journeys, lingering just beyond perception. Those who drive Highway 16 alternate after dark describe an acute awareness of the environment. Every shift of light, every movement in peripheral vision, feels significant. The air grows heavier, the temperature drops subtly, and the long stretches of road create an intimacy with the night that is difficult to ignore. Even small details, a flicker of a shadow, the rustle of leaves, take on heightened importance, as though the road itself communicates with those who traverse it. Travelers often make decisions based on instinct. Many choose to take alternate routes after sundown, wary of the phenomena reported along the highway. Others continue, curious or determined to observe the road for themselves. Those who remain encounter the sensations described: momentary figures, ghostly footsteps, and the subtle pressure of unseen presence accompanying them along the journey. By sunrise, the highway resumes its familiar form. Fog dissipates, shadows retreat, and the air feels lighter. The ghostly figures vanish, the footsteps fade, and the quiet weight of night is gone. Highway 16 alternate returns to the ordinary perception of asphalt, guardrails, and rolling hills. To a morning traveler, nothing appears unusual, yet those who have experienced the road after dark carry the memory of its other presence. The road is more than a route between points. It is a corridor where perception, memory, and unexplained phenomena intersect. The ghostly hitchhikers, the unseen footsteps, and the eerie stillness remind travelers. The ghostly hitchhikers, the unseen footsteps, and the eerie stillness remind travelers. Where shadow, sound, and presence linger just beyond sight, and filled with echoes of journeys past, and lingering impressions, knowing that this highway holds stories beyond the visible. And the road stretches endlessly into darkness. Highway 34 bypass stretches across flat plains and open fields, a long road with few lights and even fewer signs of human activity after dark. By day, the highway feels straightforward and simple, the median lined with sparse vegetation, the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. Cars pass at a steady pace, and the occasional farm or structure marks the distance, giving the road a familiar rhythm. The vastness of the plains feels calm, open, and easily navigable. As evening falls, the character of the highway changes. Shadows lengthen along the median, stretching across asphalt and grass. The absence of light deepens the feeling of isolation, and the surrounding fields become a dark, undulating landscape. The wind picks up slightly, rustling the tall grasses along the roadside, carrying the faint scent of earth and vegetation. The quiet of the night is profound, punctuated only by the occasional hum of a vehicle or distant animal call. Travelers report seeing shadows moving across the median. These shapes appear and disappear without warning, sometimes stretching along the grass and asphalt. Other times rising near the edges of the road. They are indistinct, dark against the night, and vanish the moment they are approached. The effect is unsettling, leaving drivers with the sensation of being observed, though nothing tangible is ever found. Voices are another phenomenon reported along the bypass. They rise faintly from the tall grasses, low and indistinct at first. They may call a name, echo across the field, or carry tones that sound almost like conversation. The source is never visible, and attempts to locate the voices yield nothing. They fade as quickly as they appear, leaving an impression of presence in the air itself. Radio signals sometimes behave strangely along this stretch of highway. Static becomes more pronounced at night, crackling through the cabin of a vehicle. For some, the interference transforms into loud whispers, clear enough to startle but never fully understandable. The voices on the radio seem to coincide with the appearance of shadows or the sound of voices in the grasses, heightening the feeling that the highway itself is attentive to movement and presence. The combination of shadows, voices, and radio interference produces a heightened awareness for drivers. Every flicker of light, rustle of grass, or movement along the median draws attention. The highway feels larger than it is, the empty stretches extending perception and imagination. Travelers report feeling tense, their senses sharpened as they move along the darkened road, acutely aware of every detail in the environment. The terrain amplifies these sensations. The median and fields distort perception, creating pockets of darkness, where shadows can appear and disappear unpredictably. Tall grasses bend and sway, sometimes revealing nothing, other times suggesting shapes that vanish when observed directly. The lack of landmarks or lights makes distances difficult to judge, making every figure or movement seem closer than it is. Some drivers report sudden chills or heaviness in the chest. These physical sensations accompany the auditory and visual phenomena, reinforcing the sense that the highway is alive in perception. The combination of isolation, darkness, and intermittent sensory events produces a layered experience that is difficult to ignore. Even when no shadows or voices are perceived, Highway 34 bypass maintains a presence. The open plains, sparse median, and quiet landscape create an atmosphere charged with anticipation. Every rustle of grass, distant hum of an animal, or flicker of light becomes amplified in the mind, making the environment feel alive and responsive. The road seems to hold memory and attention, carrying echoes of those who have traveled it at night before. By morning, the highway returns to its daytime character. Shadows shrink and become predictable. Grass and fields regain color and texture. The road appears calm and ordinary once more. Yet the memory of night persists. Travelers recall the shadows along the median, the whispers in the grasses, and the crackle of radio static that transformed into voices. These impressions remain vivid, leaving a lasting sense of the highway as both familiar and uncanny. Highway 34 bypass continues to stretch across the plains, unchanged in structure, but profoundly different under the cover of night. Where shadows move, voices rise from grass, and radio signals carry an unexplainable awareness. Drivers who traverse the bypass after dark leave with a heightened understanding of isolation and observation. Every shadow, every whisper, every flicker of light combines to create an experience where the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary. Highway 34 bypass is more than a road. It is a space where memory, attention, and perception converge. A corridor of subtle mystery and presence that endures long after sunrise returns calm and light to the plains. Highway 14 alternate cuts across a remote prairie, a narrow stretch of asphalt flanked by endless grasslands and distant hills. By day, the road feels open and expansive, the sky stretching wide above the plains. Traffic is minimal, and the landscape is dotted with occasional fences, abandoned barns, and small patches of trees. Drivers notice the isolation immediately, the way sound travels far across the open space, and the subtle rhythm of wind moving through the tall grass that stretches to the horizon. The landscape is flat yet alive with subtle movement. Grass ripples in the wind, birds call across the plains, and distant animals stir unseen. Signs of human habitation are minimal, and every barn, fence, and abandoned structure feels like a solitary sentinel, a witness to countless miles of empty road. The openness amplifies perception, making even ordinary sounds resonate far beyond their source. As evening approaches, the prairie begins to shift. Shadows stretch across the road, lengthening with the sinking sun. Colors deepen to muted golds and grays, and the air cools quickly. The familiar outlines of fences and barns become softened and elongated, creating shapes that seem unfamiliar under fading light. The horizon seems farther than during daylight, and the highway itself appears longer, stretching endlessly across the plains. After night falls, the landscape transforms. Figures are seen kneeling beside fences along the roadside. Their posture is deliberate, and they remain still as travelers pass. Observers often glimpse them in headlights or distant starlight, only for the figures to vanish when approached or looked at directly. The presence is fleeting yet undeniable, creating a tension that lingers as drivers continue along the empty highway. Abandoned barns occasionally display faint lights. Soft glows appear behind windows or within open doors, illuminating worn wooden beams and shadowed corners. The air along the highway grows heavy and cold. A distinct pressure settles around vehicles and people, pressing subtly against skin and clothing. Sounds carry in unusual ways across the plains. The night amplifies distant noises, making rustling grass, shifting wooden boards, or distant animal calls seem nearer than they are. Travelers often describe the highway as both long and distorted. Miles stretch farther than expected. Fences appear repeated along the road. Barns emerge seemingly out of place or distance. Shadows bend and shift across the asphalt and grass, creating the sense that the land itself is subtly alive. The ordinary pattern of travel is disrupted, leaving the observer alert and attentive to every detail. Despite the subtle unease, Highway 14 alternate does not threaten. Figures kneel silently, lights glow softly, and the air presses without harm. The phenomena are not aggressive, but persistent, creating an awareness of the landscape's presence and history. Travelers describe awe and tension mingled, a recognition that the prairie carries both beauty and subtle, unexplainable energy. The combination of visual and sensory phenomena leaves lasting impressions. Footsteps, glowing windows, kneeling figures, and the heavy air linger in memory long after leaving the highway. Even during daylight, the road seems longer, the barns more prominent, and the fences more distinct. Observers carry an awareness of the night along with them, a subtle sense that the prairie has witnessed more than can be seen at a glance. By morning, the highway returns to calm. Sunlight warms asphalt and grass, shadows shrink, and the barns appear empty and ordinary. The kneeling figures are gone, and the heavy pressure in the air dissipates. Yet those who traverse the highway at night remember the sights, sounds, and sensations, and the landscape retains an aura that cannot be erased. Highway 14 alternate remains a space of isolation and presence. Its prairie stretches, fences, and barns carry memory and subtle motion. Figures kneel, lights appear in abandoned structures, and travelers feel the weight of the night pressing close. The highway stretches endlessly, offering solitude, reflection, and the awareness that even in the quietest, most remote landscapes, the land may watch, respond, and remember. Those who journey along it after dark carry memory. The impressions of light, movement, and presence linger, Shadows along fences. Fleeting figures. Glowing barns. And the heavy prairie air. Isolation, perception, and the unknown converge. Beneath open skies. Highway 14 alternate. A route through space. A landscape alive with subtle energy. Where isolation, perception, and the unknown converge. Highway 79 spur stretches across open plains, a long and isolated road where the horizon feels endless. During the day, the route appears ordinary, lined with flat fields, occasional fences, and the occasional tree breaking the monotony of the landscape. The sun casts broad light across the asphalt, revealing every crack and curve in the pavement. Wind moves freely across the plains, carrying the scent of earth and grass, and even in its openness, there is a quiet stillness that foreshadows the experiences reported after dark. As evening approaches, the air shifts. Shadows stretch long across the road, the sky deepens to hues of orange and purple, and the silence grows heavier. The flatness of the plains exaggerates every sound. The hum of tires on asphalt seems amplified, the rustle of grasses along the roadside becomes noticeable, and distant wildlife carries clearly across the open space. It is in this quiet that the unusual phenomena of Highway 79 spur often emerge. One of the most frequently reported experiences is phantom headlights. Drivers report seeing a vehicle approaching from the opposite direction, its beams bright and steady. As they prepare to pass, the headlights draw nearer, yet no car ever appears. Moments later, the lights vanish entirely, leaving the driver with an empty road and a heightened sense of awareness. The effect is startling, sudden, and sometimes repeated along stretches of the highway. It creates a tension that is difficult to shake, a feeling that the road itself holds attention and memory. Shadowy figures are another common phenomenon. Travelers have glimpsed shapes moving along the roadside, dark silhouettes that seem human yet remain indistinct. Some appear to stand still, observing the passing cars, while others seem to move slowly through the fields. Approaching these figures or slowing to get a better look causes them to disappear. The effect is brief yet vivid, leaving a lingering impression of presence along an otherwise empty road. The combination of phantom headlights and shadowy figures creates a heightened state of awareness for those driving the spur. Every curve, every dip in the asphalt, every flicker of light or movement draws attention. Drivers report a sense of unease, a subtle tension that grows with each mile. Some even experience nausea or a rising feeling of fear, not from threat but from the cumulative weight of perception and isolation. The road becomes more than a physical path, it becomes a space where sensory experience is amplified and ordinary perception is challenged. The geography of the area contributes to these phenomena. Open plains provide unobstructed views, allowing light and sound to carry further than expected. Shadows stretch unpredictably in the low evening light, creating shapes that can resemble figures at the edge of vision. The flatness exaggerates movement, and the road itself becomes a frame for perception, guiding attention toward the subtle interplay of light, shadow, and landscape. History also plays a role in shaping the atmosphere. Highway 79 spur has long been noted for accidents, sudden weather shifts. And incidents that left a mark on local memory. Some believe that the phantom lights and figures are residual impressions of those who traveled here long ago, echoes of human activity embedded in the road. Whether these are psychological effects, environmental anomalies, or subtle imprints of past events. The experiences are consistent across multiple reports. Traveling the spur at night produces an immersive experience. The headlights on vehicles seem unusually bright against the darkened plains. And every flicker or shift in intensity is magnified. Figures appear at unexpected intervals. Sometimes standing at the edge of the asphalt. Sometimes moving through the tall grasses. The stillness of the open land amplifies awareness, making small movements or sounds feel significant. Drivers feel as though they are being observed. Not threatened, yet the perception of presence is undeniable. Even brief stops along the road enhance the intensity. One can feel the openness of the plains and the low hum of nighttime insects or distant animals. The flat horizon seems endless, and shadows from moonlight or headlights create an environment where perception is heightened, and the ordinary becomes unusual. The experience is immersive, engaging sight, sound, and awareness simultaneously. Leaving Highway 79 spur brings relief and a return to ordinary perception, yet memory retains the phenomena. The flickering headlights, the shadowy figures, and the weight of presence in the air remain vivid in recollection. Drivers recall the stretches of asphalt, the empty fields, and the horizon that seems to carry attention with it. The road lingers as more than a route between points, it becomes a space where history, perception, and subtle phenomena intersect. Highway 79 spur is at once simple and extraordinary. By night, it transforms into a corridor of heightened awareness, where phantom lights, fleeting figures, and a palpable sense of observation make every mile memorable. Travelers experience the highway in ways that blend history, perception, and landscape, leaving a lasting impression of a road that is alive not in movement, but in memory, attention, and subtle presence. By day, the landscape appears peaceful, the horizon soft and uninterrupted. By night, the route transforms. Darkness deepens the plains, and ordinary perception becomes heightened. Travelers notice subtle shifts in the air, the way shadows stretch, and the way the wind carries sound differently across the open land. Figures appear suddenly in headlights. One moment the road is empty, the next, a shadow stands in the lane, indistinct yet unmistakable. They move neither toward nor away, remaining still in posture, and vanish when approached. The forms are fleeting, and their presence lingers in memory long after they disappear. Drivers report a sudden awareness of the space around them, as though the road itself is observing. Cold wind sweeps across the prairie without warning. Gusts arrive sharp and sudden, pressing against cars and chilling skin despite closed windows. The wind moves unpredictably, drifting across the asphalt, rising from the grass, and swirling in patterns that defy natural expectation. The wind is not accompanied by storm or weather activity, yet its presence is undeniable, intensifying the sensation that the road is alive and responsive. Voices whisper from nowhere, faint, indistinct, carrying tones that resemble speech or warning. Travelers cannot locate the voices, yet they are clear enough to unsettle. The whispers rise and fall with the wind, sometimes combining with the rustle of prairie grass or the hum of tires, creating an impression that the land itself is speaking. The combination of figures, wind, and whispers produces a layered effect on perception. Shadows lengthen in the periphery, lights flash in unexpected reflections, and sound carries in ways that feel deliberate. Shadows lengthen in the periphery, lights flash in unexpected reflections, and sound carries in ways that feel deliberate. Shadows lengthen in the periphery, lights flash in unexpected reflections, and sound carries in ways that feel deliberate. Every mile becomes charged, every bend in the highway more pronounced, every glance to the horizon more vigilant. Every mile becomes charged, every bend in the highway more pronounced, every glance to the horizon more vigilant. Every mile becomes charged, every bend in the highway more pronounced, every glance to the horizon more vigilant. Even familiar stretches of the road take on new meaning at night. Distances appear altered, dips and rises in the asphalt seem exaggerated. And every shadow along the prairie embankment draws scrutiny. The disappearing figures appear with consistency along certain areas of the route, aligning with curves, embankments, and open stretches of grassland. Travelers often feel a subtle pressure, a reminder of unseen observation that follows them along the highway. The prairie itself amplifies the effect. The tall grasses sway, shifting shadows and patterns of light. Embankments and low hills create pockets where figures may appear or vanish. The wind moves differently across the open terrain, bending sound, carrying distant echoes, and shaping perception. Even small changes in vehicle speed or light intensity alter the apparent position of shadows and forms, making the environment feel dynamic and responsive. Travelers describe the experience as both isolating and immersive. The road seems empty yet crowded, ordinary yet transformed. Figures appear with purpose yet remain silent. Whispers are unintelligible yet carry meaning. The wind presses against vehicles without explanation. Every element reinforces the sense that Highway 44 alternate is more than a path. Even those familiar with the highway are affected. Repeated drives at night heighten awareness. Drivers report anticipating figures before they appear, sensing the wind before it arrives, hearing whispers that are not present during daylight. The highway operates on a subtle logic, a rhythm that is not overt but deeply felt. The combination of sensory effects leaves a lasting impression, one that persists long after leaving the road. Some travelers never take the route at night again. The memories of sudden figures, chilling gusts, and disembodied whispers create an experience that is difficult to shake. Daylight restores the ordinary appearance of the prairie, flattening shadows and dissipating tension, yet recollection of night travel lingers vividly. Awareness of the unseen and the remembered shapes the perception of subsequent journeys. By morning, Highway 44 alternate appears calm and ordinary. The prairie stretches in uniform green and gold. The road lies smooth and uninterrupted. And the wind returns to normal patterns. Figures vanish entirely. Whispers dissolve. And the cold air recedes. Yet those who traveled at night recall each moment in detail. The shadowy forms in headlights. The sudden gusts of wind. The ethereal voices that drifted across the asphalt and grasslands. Highway 44 alternate continues to run across open prairie, isolated, straight, and deceptively calm. By night, it becomes a corridor of subtle phenomena where shadows, wind, and whispers converge to create an environment alive with memory and presence. Drivers who traverse it encounter more than pavement and prairie, they experience a landscape that observes, responds, and leaves an indelible impression, a highway where attention is demanded, perception is sharpened, and the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary. Thank you for traveling the haunted prairie highways of South Dakota with me tonight. These roads stretch endlessly, carrying not only cars and travelers, but echoes of the past. Every shadow, every whisper, every fleeting figure is a story left behind by those who came before. If you ever drive a prairie highway after dark, listen closely. The wind may carry more than just the sound of grasses swaying. Would you dare ride along these haunted highways alone at midnight, surrounded by shadow and whispers, or would you turn back before the prairie claims your attention? Rest well, my friend. Until our next haunted journey.